Welcome back to Sage Connections. Today, I'm joined by David DiFiore, and we are diving into the topic of seed oils. This is something that has become increasingly talked about, but also increasingly confusing, with a lot of strong opinions on both sides. In this conversation, we talk about what seed oils actually are, how they've become so prevalent in the modern diet, and why they've been promoted as heart healthy for so long. We also explore some concerns around how these oils are processed and used, as well as how to think about alternative fats like olive oil, avocado oil, butter, and tallow. If you've ever wondered what to believe when it comes to cooking oils and how they may impact your health, this is a really interesting and thought-provoking conversation. Enjoy. So, can you start by sharing a little bit about your background and your general approach to evaluating information and questioning common narratives? How did you get into this?
Yeah, it's a long story. I don't have a health background. I was born and raised here in Detroit, and I work at a large financial institution doing private wealth management. So I'm in finance. But it was really going back to high school when I was looking to just biohack, be a better athlete. And so that was the foray into health and wellness for me. And it was basic stuff. It was eating more protein and looking at calories and macros and trying to just get big and be more athletic and just do better on the field with what I was doing. So I really didn't get into the nitty-gritty of where we're going with this conversation until COVID, actually. It was COVID. Like, what were we going to do? It was, we were working at home, and I had a lot more time to listen to podcasts and to read white papers. And the constant theme that I kept hearing were seed oils. And I never knew what they were before 2020. So I started doing my own independent research and come to find out these things are pretty harmful for the human body. So that was really the foray into this discussion, what we're going to talk about. And obviously, we can go as deep as you want. Um, but that was really the genesis of this.
Is there any particular thing that sort of stood out regarding the seed oils or a specific podcast?
It was so many. So it was there would be mentions of it on the Joe Rogan podcast, on Max Lugavere's podcast. It just kept going on and on. And then I did again my own independent research of what is a seed oil, why are they harmful, and I'm glad that I've been spreading awareness of how harmful they are because I would put them on the Mount Rushmore of things that you should avoid. They're that bad. So, but yeah, not in particular one, but it was a culmination of podcasts.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Okay, so give us a little bit of history and overview of what seed oils are and how they became part of our diet.
So yeah, a seed oil at its core is a plant-based vegetable oil. And really the first introduction that the American diet saw was in the early 1900s when Procter and Gamble came out with Crisco. I'm sure your audience knows what that is. It's in most pies. Like that's what I grew up knowing Crisco is it's in the crust of the pie. But if you look at the ingredients of Crisco, it's the whole thing is seed oils. It's originally it was derived from cottonseed. That's what Procter and Gamble used. And where it came more into popularity later on, but let's talk about why these seed oils are so harmful. So they have very high levels of omega-6 fatty acids or linoleic acid. And that causes a great amount of inflammation, oxidative stress, and that then leads to chronic diseases. So the process of how you industrialize these oils for the human body to digest, well, not really digest because we cause inflammation, but for us to ingest them, you have to bleach them, use incredibly high heat, like over 150 degrees type heat. Um, and then you have to also there's the smell is so rancid that you have to deodorize it too. So it's a grotesque process to process these seed oils. And the thing that was really harmful was that these were labeled as heart healthy. If you look at a Crisco label, it says American Heart Association heart healthy. And they used vegetable oil as the word to make it seem like these are good for you, right? You eat broccoli, right? It's a vegetable that's good for you. And so the American population was essentially duped into thinking that these were heart healthy, but really they weren't. If you look at since the 1950s, around 1% of the American population was diabetic. Now it's close to 50%. And it's all been around the ramp up of these seed oils in ultra processed foods, which has now caused all these chronic diseases like diabetes.
So they were considered heart healthy historically, but I think we can honestly say that they're definitely not healthy for neither the heart nor any other system that we have. So what are the main concerns related to the oils and how they're used and how they behave under heat?
Oh, sure. Well, since they're highly industrialized, they are pliable, very pliable in heat. So if you're a banquet hall, all right, and you're hosting a wedding and there's 300 plates, so 300 people at the wedding, you can use canola oil in you can really just reuse the same batch of canola oil just repeat because it can take and sustain such high heat and not go rancid. If I were to say do that with olive oil, you'd have to change the olive oil out because it's not as pliable. It's natural, right? So if at high heat, at some point it's going to degrade and go rancid. That's actually a good sign that it's real, right? If you put it at high heat, it's going to damage, right? But not a canola oil, not a soybean oil or a cottonseed oil. So that's where the industry has gone. It's incredibly easy to use. It's so cheap, right? If you go to the supermarket and look at seed oil, a canola oil versus a natural olive oil from Greece, there's a huge price difference. The one from Greece is going to be a heck of a lot more expensive. I'll tell you that. So, but again, all this was for profit, right? So in the 80s, we talked about this before the podcast. In the 80s, the cigarette companies hired all these scientists, and the Surgeon General came out in the 60s saying, hey, smoking's bad. It causes heart disease. It can cause cancer, right? So smoking started going down, right? The decline of it started happening around the 60s and the 70s. So the cigarette companies are looking at each other like, well, what do we do? We hired all these scientists to make cigarettes more addictive. What else can we do? So they started buying up food companies. And if you look in the 1980s, the biggest mergers and acquisitions were all cigarette companies buying food companies. And by the 1990s, I mean, seed oils were prevalent in almost everything. And all the ultra processed foods that you can think of have it in there. And they're highly addictive and they cause, like, obviously, as we mentioned, a myriad of chronic diseases over long term usage.
Yeah.
So, long winded way of saying about the heat, but yeah, they're very damaging to your body.
Well, so that's what's interesting is first of all, I don't think a lot of people understand that these oils are just reused and reused. And your fries at McDonald's are fried in the same oil. I don't know for how long exactly, but it's not just
Yeah.
like a one dip and then they change it out.
Right. But
Number
it's
one.
that's a great example for your audience. You go to a McDonald's, they're dunking that basket over and over and over again, and it's boiling, right? You see like the oil boiling. So you know it's hot. Versus like if they were to use beef tallow, they probably have to change that out at some point, right? It's an animal fat versus a highly industrialized oil that can withstand crazy amounts of heat, right? Over and over again.
Yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned, like the addictive nature of processed food, is really how we're in this mess right now where everyone feels the need to take GLP-1 to quiet the food noise. And that food noise comes from the fact that these companies specifically created processed foods in order to for people to become addicted to them, right? And to buy more. Because you can't just have what's the saying, right? You can't have one chip or like how many bowls of cereal can one person have in one sitting? I'm at college, I was very guilty of just, whatever was missing, I'd fill. If the milk was still there, I'd put a little cereal in there. If the cereal was left, I put a little, and then, half a box is gone. So it is interesting to just understand the origins of where all of this came from, because I think that when you eat natural food, you don't really have as much food noise. How do you feel about that?
This is a great way to segue into what I would recommend for
Hmm.
anyone who's looking for getting into health and wellness. I would first start off with not what we can put into our body, but actually what we shouldn't put into our body. And I, the easiest one obviously is seed oils. If we eliminate ingesting seed oils, that's going to do you so much good, right? The brain fog that you may have from ingesting these seed oils all the time, that's what we call low-grade chronic inflammation, right? Where you have that brain fog all the time because your body's fighting. Your body can't digest these and it's throwing everything off top to bottom. And that's what causes brain fog, right? It's like lube. It's like when you're sick, right? Where when you're sick, you're lethargic, you have low energy. It's because your body's immune system is ramping up, right? It's trying to fight whatever is making you sick. Same thing with the seed oils. Something that's a toxin hits your body, and the body's trying to fight it. So eliminate the seed oils. And then I would say to keep going down the rabbit hole is eliminate refined sugars, and also pasteurized dairy. So any dairy that's been industrialized, where a lot of the enzymes, the natural enzymes that are found in dairy, which are actually used to help you digest that dairy, they're stripped away. So when you put pasteurized dairy in your body, you can't digest it versus raw, unpasteurized that have that natural enzyme in there, no problem digesting it. So I would first start with what we don't ingest. Then we can figure out the sourcing as far as what to put into our body, right? And also think about every successful person out there. Everyone has goals, right? So I would ask the person sitting across the table, what is your goal? Is it for longevity? Is it for aesthetic? Do you just not want to feel like a bomb you know, went off in your gut, right? Where you have a seed oil or something that causes inflammation. It all starts with what is your goal? And that's keep it simple. Let's not ingest certain items. And then what are your goals? And then work towards that.
Yeah. So what types of fats do you personally use for cooking?
So when we're cooking in high heat, I typically use avocado oil or coconut oil. And then when dressing certain dishes, I will use extra virgin olive oil. And I also use ghee butter and just regular natural grass-fed butter.
Okay. And then what do you think about the quality of olive oil and avocado oil? I know that there's been some discussion. You mentioned Max Lugavere, who does a lot of research on this topic, and he sort of talks about how some olive oils that are labeled extra virgin olive oil may actually be mixed with lower quality oils that are not as pure. So what do you think people should look at when they're looking for actual quality?
Yeah. So yeah, it all comes down to sourcing. And it's so difficult to know. But I would say use your gut instinct because like we're not chemists at the end of the day. Like we don't have like beakers and a Bunsen burner to like test like which olive oil has maybe a canola oil laced in it. But I would just say use your common sense and think about where the olive oil or whatever it is sourced from. So if I go to the farmer's market and I'm talking to some guy that's selling olive oil, and I'm just having a conversation with him, and he's like, we've had this land in our family for years in Greece, and we've been tilling this land. We've never used herbicides or pesticides. When you hear that stuff, that's probably a good sign, right? And obviously on top of that, you have the natural air, the sea salts, it's clean. I mean, that's probably a good source of knowing that there's no canola oil in that. If you go to the supermarket and there is a olive oil that's owned by one of the big conglomerates, I'd be a little leery of that, right? Of trusting that. So again, I think it just comes down to sourcing, knowing your farmers. Luba, you mentioned when we first met how there is a farm to table or supermarket in Plymouth or
Yes.
Northville.
Yes, it's called Pure Pastures.
See, that's the kind of stuff that I think people need to be more aware of, right? Where you can stand face to face with a farmer and ask them, do you use herbicides, pesticides?
Mhm.
Where, ask about the dirt and the quality of their crop, right? Or knowing, do you guys use seed oils in your mix? Just ask them. You're literally just standing face to face with a farmer. So that I think is where, you just have to just use your common sense. Like olive oil should be from Greece or Italy, not from Peru. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I think it's important to point out the fact that this stuff does exist. I mean, it kind of seems overwhelming when people think about, shopping for food and they have busy lives and maybe they have families. They don't have time to think about this stuff. But it is quite available if you just kind of do a little bit of research and then you can stick to the people that you know. I did a podcast a while back with a company called Good Stuff Cacao, and they make chocolate in like the most pure whey pie. I mean, it's literally just raw organic cacao, raw organic honey, and there's not all these additives. And the dirt that the cacao, grows in is it has polyphenol, so it's very, very healthy. So, sometimes these discussions can make people a little bit intimidated, but there are definitely lots of options out there. You just kind of have to seek them out a little bit, but that's the beauty of doing podcasts like this because at least we can bring awareness to it. So let's talk about sort of broader perspective. So we talked about seed oils, and I think from your perspective, that's probably the number one thing that people can switch out in their diet when they're eating at home. What do you think most restaurants use?
they definitely the majority of restaurants use industrialized seed oils because it is very cheap. And as we mentioned with that 300-person wedding, they're incredibly pliable. They can just be cranking out dishes left and right using the same oil from the last dish versus having to clean it and do it all over again, right? So that was one of the biggest challenges that the Detroit Athletic Club, the DAC, faced. When I met with Chef Loving and I asked him about changing or at least spreading awareness around these oils, and he said yes, it was a big deal because cook points change, tastes change, right? You have to overhaul everything that you're used to because it isn't easy to make a change. It's easy to keep using seed oils because they're so cheap and pliable, and you can just blast away as many dishes as you want. So I give the Detroit Athletic Club incredible kudos for taking on this task because of how difficult it is. And Chef Loving and his team they're incredible. But it also is geographic. Going back to your question, I was in San Diego a couple weeks ago, and I do think there is a lot more awareness around these harmful oils in California. At least this is just anecdotal. I was in La Jolla, and I go to most of the restaurants I went to had seed oil free options, or it said, we don't use seed oils.
Mm.
So there's a few restaurants here in Detroit that have taken that. You're starting to see more of that. I know Commonwealth in Birmingham, they're, I believe, like 99% seed oil free. There may be like one item that is that 1% where they're not fully 100%. But that's a good example of a restaurant that is adopted no seed oils. But again, to answer your question, long-winded, most restaurants are probably using them.
Yeah. So is there anything we can do when we're ordering to help
Yes.
mitigate that?
Yeah. So it is much easier to do this um, breakfast and lunch. So this is a little cheat code what I'm telling your audience here. But if you order breakfast foods, you can ask for, let's just use 3 scrambled eggs. You can ask, can you please cook the eggs in butter? Even if it isn't natural grass-fed butter, it still came from a cow, right? So I know that that butter that they're using doesn't have seed oil in it. So any omelet that you order or eggs, just ask them, please cook it in butter. For dinner, again, it gets a little more complicated because if you go to a steakhouse, it's easy. Just ask for steak and have them cook it in butter. All right, that's an easy one. Um, I will say salads are, it's so funny how salads are the quote unquote healthy option. Like, oh, I'm going light today. I'm gonna get a salad. When you think about how damaging salads actually are, people don't think about this. The lettuce itself is probably sprayed with glyphosate. It's an herbicide, pesticide. And then the salad dressing that they're using is probably using a seed oil. So getting a salad is not, I would not recommend getting salads. Um, so again, it gets more difficult at night with dinner. But again, there's ways around it. But I would say breakfast and lunch, depending on what restaurant you're at, if you just order breakfast, get eggs and have them cook it in butter, you'll be fine.
Yeah. I don't want to gloss over this. I do want to just say for my audience that David was actually behind getting, sort of the change at the Detroit Athletic Club to go from seed oils to avocado oil. And so thank you for that, taking that initiative. So aside from seed oils, what else? What else? Okay, so we talked about processed foods, processed sugars. What else do you think is on that list of like if somebody is ready to make a big commitment to overhauling their diet? What else? We talked about water a little bit before we started. So can you talk about that?
Water's huge. Water's huge. You're a medical professional. What's the adage where everyone's like X percentage of your body's water? What is it?
I think it's like 70%.
Okay, so 70% of the human body's water. So it's important, right? So this is where it gets, I know you mentioned that you use filtered water. So my problem with filtered water is that it filters everything, right? So it filters the good and the bad. So what is the bad? It's the fluorides, it's the whatever, processed chemicals that they use, heavy metal, whatever, right? Those are bad. The good are the electrolytes that are naturally occurring in water, which is magnesium, potassium, and calcium. So how do we just get those, right? Just the electrolytes. You get it with spring water. Spring water that's bottled at the source that has those naturally occurring electrolytes in it. That's what we need. That's what we need for good cellular function, for mitochondrial function, right? So what's the first part of electrolyte? It's electricity, it's energy, right? So if you're fueling your body with spring water, that's feeding your cells. So you're actually hydrating your cells at the cellular level. That's what we're trying to get at, right? So for someone that's just trying to get in and just try to make some tweaks, just start drinking spring water. I don't care what it is, just start drinking spring water. I personally drink Mountain Valley water because that is in glass jugs. So there's no plastic that's bleeding into the water. We can talk about BPA and the polyphenols is what you mentioned. So the microplastics and the damage that causes as well. But Mountain Valley comes in glass and it's bottled at the source. So when you have water that's not bottled at the source, there's a transport of that water from spring to bottling facility. And that we don't want, right? Who knows what happens in that journey from A to B. Okay. Mountain Valley, bottled at the source. So water is incredibly important because I would say most people, Luba, are dehydrated because they're drinking dead water. They're drinking water that has no electrolytes. So that's one thing I would change is hydration and water.
What do you think of Element or any of these additive electrolytes?
I'm a fan of them, but you have to, again, it's all you have to look at the labels. And Element is interesting. They use, I believe, table salt. So like I wouldn't touch Element. And if you look at other ones like Relight or Salt of the Earth, those, again, it all comes back to what is the salt source. Salt, by the way, for your audience, I like salt. You need salt. Think about when you sweat, when you do a workout, you're perspiring salt. So you need to put that back into your body. But it's all about what is the right one. So Relight is through Redmond, and that's a very good salt mine in, I believe, Utah. But that has actual trace minerals in that salt. That's what we need. So again, it all comes back to sourcing and making sure you're getting the right one and doing your homework, right? So again, I'm a fan of them, but again, just know where it's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, starting out with the seed oils and the water, and you're halfway there. And then, yeah, look for farmers markets near you. You know, you can buy seasonal fruits and vegetables. You can talk to the farmers that actually grow, uh, these products and see what's in the soil and how many pesticides they use. And then if you have a local market that sources meat locally and also knows the farmers, I would say go there. Yeah, I think it's so important to be aware first and foremost of what we're actually putting in our bodies. So, any last words to the audience about anything that you find really helpful for your health? Doesn't have to be food related, but any thoughts?
No, look, I'm a big proponent of becoming the best version of yourself and being your best. And it's not about you. It's not about doing it for you. It's actually doing it for everyone else around you. And if I feel like if you're becoming the best version of yourself, you're benefiting society and everyone around you. So that was really my whole goal with this, right? Was how do I become the best version of myself to do my job as effectively as possible to help the most amount of people? And I can't do that if I have brain fog and if I can't think the right way, or if I have a stomach ache because I ate something that had seed oils in it, right? So I truly believe this is a selfless act to become the best version of yourself and to put the right foods in your body. That's what I would tell your audience is that this is for everyone else.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to David DiFiore for coming on and sharing his perspective on this topic. Hopefully, this conversation made you think a little more critically about the foods we consume every day and the information we hear around nutrition and health. Whether you completely agree with everything discussed or not, having open conversations around topics that have become so normalized in the modern diet is important. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone who might find it helpful, and leave a review. It really helps more people find the show. As always, take care of your health and your wellness.